Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story of betrayal and epic revenge, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We're about to uncover a scandal that rocked the foundations of Wall Street. The gala night crash. Imagine this. The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons, Manhattan. Hundreds of the city's most influential investors, partners, and corporate sharks are mingling, glass in hand. The atmosphere is thick with success, power, and high-stakes deals. Then, she walks in. She is Eleanor Vance, and for 3 long years, she has been a ghost in her own $12 million penthouse, waiting for the man who was running a secret second life just across the street. She has been dining alone, believing her husband, Ethan Thorne, CEO of a high-flying consulting firm, was on crucial business trips to Boston, Miami, and London. She was wrong. Ethan was using their marital funds to pay for his mistress's luxury apartment and their 2 children's elite schooling. Tonight is the annual Thorne and Associates Gala, the most critical event on the corporate calendar. Ethan is mid-pitch to a group of international investors, his future resting on his perfectly groomed image of stable family man. Suddenly, the crowd parts. Eleanor glides in, wearing a custom marigold gold gown that makes her glow like a solar flare, effortlessly drawing every single eye in the room. She moves through the sea of black ties like a queen, reclaiming her throne. She stops directly in front of Ethan, her smile blinding, her eyes cold steel. In front of his most valuable clients and partners, she reaches into her designer clutch, pulls out an elegant cream-colored envelope, and hands it to him. "Happy anniversary, darling," she purrs, her voice carrying the perfect pitch of public adoration and private venom. "These are the divorce papers. Adultery, marital fraud, and a lawsuit for the willful destruction of assets. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Ethan. You're going to need it." In one single spectacular moment, she exposed his lies, demolished his meticulously built reputation, and finally, dramatically reclaimed her dignity. This is the story of how an invisible woman became the architect of her own destiny. And a living, breathing reminder that no one should ever settle for being someone's second option. Part 1. The Ghost in the Penthouse. Eleanor woke up, as she had for the past 3 years, alone in the cavernous, king-sized bed. The space on Ethan's side was undisturbed, the sheets pulled taut and cold, a permanent monument to his absence. It was 11:30 a.m., and the silence of their empty Upper East Side penthouse was a suffocating thing. She moved slowly, her bare feet meeting the chilling marble floor. Sunlight streamed through the enormous windows, illuminating a lifestyle of luxury that she had once believed was her happily ever after. How painfully wrong she had been. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," greeted Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, her polite smile failing to hide the faint look of pity that Eleanor had grown to recognize. "Shall I prepare breakfast?" "Just coffee, Mrs. Gable, thank you," Eleanor replied, offering the practiced, brittle smile of a woman pretending everything was fine. She sat on the balcony, wrapped in a cream silk robe, gazing at the endless, glittering expanse of Manhattan. From this height, everything seemed so small, so insignificant, exactly how she felt in her own marriage. She vividly recalled meeting Ethan Thorne, the dazzling CEO of Thorne and Associates, at a business conference at the St. Regis. He was late, impeccably tailored, his hair slicked back, his presence dominating the room. He had a voice that hypnotized, and a devastating smile. He pursued her with meticulous detail, promising her not just love, but an empire they would build together. A 5-carat diamond ring sealed the deal, a promise of forever that now felt like a cruel joke. The first few months of marriage, before Eleanor gave up her burgeoning corporate strategy career to be the perfect, available wife, had been different. Ethan made an effort, but slowly, the romantic dinners were replaced by lonely meals in front of the TV. The good morning kisses became distracted nods. "My work is incredibly demanding, Eleanor," he'd say, scrolling through emails at dinner. "I need your unwavering support. I need to know you'll be here waiting for me." And she had been. Always. The business trips to Boston and Miami grew more frequent. Always crucial meetings, irreplaceable opportunities. When she suggested joining him, he'd dismiss her gently. "These are purely work trips, my love. You'd be bored. We'll travel for pleasure when things settle down." But they never settled down. She filled her days with yoga, charity work, and abstract painting classes, desperately trying to feel useful, important. Yet the pitying looks of other women at her abandoned wife status were unmistakable. She was a woman of intelligence and potential, reduced to a decorative accessory waiting in a golden cage. That evening, the familiar pattern repeated. A perfect dinner. Rack of lamb and asparagus, ready by 8. Waiting until 10. The inevitable text arrived. "Love, things got complicated here in Boston. Have to stay one more night. Love you." Eleanor stared at the phone, the familiar stone of disappointment settling in her stomach. That night, as she lay in the vast, cold emptiness of her marital bed, Eleanor allowed herself to cry for the life she'd surrendered, for the bright, ambitious woman she had lost, and for the growing, terrifying intuition that there was something far darker behind all the absences, all the excuses. Interaction point. 3. Eleanor is starting to feel that cold suspicion. If you were in her place, what's the very first thing you'd check? His calendar, bank accounts, or social media? Let us know in the comments below. Part 2. The truth across the street. Eleanor woke up to a throbbing headache. The wine was a mistake, but it was better than the alternative. Mrs. Gable entered with the morning paper, folded open to the society page. Eleanor's blood turned to ice as she read the headline. "Charity Ball Lights Up Miami. Business Elite Attend." There was Ethan. Dressed, but he wasn't alone. On his arm, radiant in a ruby-red gown, was a stunning, younger woman. The caption read, "Financial Titan, Ethan Thorne, accompanied by architect Serafina Reyes at last night's benefit." Serafina Reyes, in a cold, determined frenzy. Eleanor opened her laptop. A quick search revealed Serafina Reyes, a 26-year-old architect specializing in commercial design. But the real gut punch came from her social media. Photos of Serafina at restaurants Eleanor recognized as Ethan's supposed client dinners. Photos geotagged in Miami, London, and Boston, all matching Ethan's business trips. And then, the image that shattered her world. A smiling photo of Serafina with 2 small children, a boy about 3 and a girl around 5. The caption, "My little loves, Mom adores you infinitely. Double the blessings." The children had Ethan's dark eyes, Ethan's crooked smile. Eleanor slammed the laptop shut. 3 years. 3 years wasted, waiting for a man who had a completely parallel family. "Mrs. Gable," Eleanor said, her voice eerily calm. "I need you to be completely honest. Did you know anything?" The housekeeper's averted gaze was all the confirmation Eleanor needed. "About a year ago, Mrs. Vance, odd credit card bills started arriving. Expensive children's clothing, tuition fees. And sometimes, when Mr. Thorne said he was traveling, I saw his car in the parking garage of the building across the street. The luxury residential tower, the 10th floor." Eleanor dressed meticulously in a tailored black suit. She walked across the street, radiating an icy confidence. At the concierge desk, she used her perfect practiced smile and her wedding license to charm the nervous attendant. "Apartment 1002, ma'am, but maybe you should call first." Minutes later, Eleanor stood in front of Unit 1002, the emergency key shaking in her hand. The moment she opened the door, she stepped into the life she was supposed to have. The apartment was warm, lived in, and full of life. Toys scattered, crayon drawings on the fridge, and on the main wall, a large, beautiful photo. Ethan, Serafina, and the 2 children, all smiling on a beach. Ethan looked genuinely, blissfully happy. A happiness Eleanor hadn't witnessed in years. She walked into the master bedroom. Serafina's intimate toiletries on the dresser, beautiful clothes in the closet, and photos on the nightstand. Ethan and Serafina in Paris, the same hotel as their honeymoon. Eleanor sat on the bed her husband shared with his other woman and felt an intense, cold clarity. The truth was here. No more doubt. No more excuses. She began photographing everything, every receipt, every drawing, every piece of evidence of the parallel life built with her marital funds. As she was about to leave, she heard the keys jingle outside. Ethan's distinct, familiar laugh, followed by Serafina's voice and the excited chatter of children. The door opened. Ethan froze, his face cycling through surprise, terror, and gut-wrenching guilt. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" he stammered. Eleanor rose, a pillar of dignified fury. "I think that's my question for you, Ethan." Serafina, holding the little girl, appeared behind him, her eyes wide with confusion. "Ethan, who is this?" Eleanor didn't wait for his pathetic explanation. "I am his wife, his legal wife, by the way, the one who has been waiting at home for 3 years, while he built this beautiful life with you." Serafina recoiled. "His wife? But you told me you were divorced, that she was a youthful mistake." Eleanor met Serafina's terrified gaze. "Well, dear, it seems my husband lied to both of us." Ethan lunged for her. "Eleanor, we can talk about this privately. Don't make this ugly." "Ugly?" Eleanor's voice was like ice. "It was ugly the moment you started using my love and my money to finance a second life. And as for public, well, I guess that depends on how cooperative you are with the divorce." She walked out, leaving 3 traumatized people behind, but feeling lighter than she had in years. She had finally traded in her passive role as the victim for the power of the truth. That night, she made a single call. "Charlotte, it's me. I need your help. The biggest, nastiest revenge a corporate attorney can muster." Part 3. The Architects of Vengeance. Charlotte Vance, Eleanor's younger sister, a ferocious corporate litigation attorney, arrived the next day. Adultery, marital fraud, bigamy, asset concealment. This is a gold mine, Elle. But we aren't going to fight a quiet war. We're going to launch a nuclear strike. The plan was audacious. Gather ironclad evidence. Use private investigators and legal means to document every single financial transaction and asset Ethan had acquired. The ultimate betrayal. Charlotte proposed a secret alliance with Serafina Reyes, framing her as another victim of Ethan's elaborate lies. "She's been raising his children under a false pretense. She will cooperate, and she will be an invaluable witness." The grand finale. The annual Thorne and Associates Gala. Eleanor would attend, not as the invisible wife, but as the dazzling, powerful woman Ethan had tried to smother. She would deliver the divorce papers publicly. Charlotte insisted on the final detail. "You need to shine, Elle. You need to remind everyone, especially him, what a colossal mistake he made." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Eleanor's transformation was a rebirth. She hired a team, a stylist, a personal trainer, a confidence coach. She was reclaiming her space, her power, her lost ambition. Call to action. 3. Do you think Serafina is a victim or a willing participant? Her alliance with Eleanor is risky. Comment below with your predictions for the gala. Will Ethan crumble under the pressure? The private meeting between Eleanor, Charlotte, Serafina, and her sister felt surreal. But Serafina was broken and terrified. "He told me he was divorced. He showed me papers," Serafina cried. Charlotte, the legal hawk, confirmed the truth. They are likely forgeries, Serafina. He is still legally married to my sister. He lied to both of you, and he used his marital funds to maintain your lifestyle. But if you cooperate with us, we can protect you and your children legally. Serafina, realizing she was facing ruin, signed the cooperation agreement. The two women, united by the same betrayal, became allies against the man who had weaponized lies. Finally, Eleanor's gown arrived. The shimmering custom marigold gold dress from a famous Fifth Avenue boutique. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who was beautiful, intelligent, and most importantly, free. Part 4. The Queen's Reckoning, the night of the gala, the Four Seasons ballroom pulsed with the life of high finance. Eleanor walked in alone, a vision of confidence and power. Every head turned. She didn't rush to Ethan. Instead, she spent the next hour socializing effortlessly. She connected with Roberto Mendoza, a major industry figure, who immediately offered her a consulting position on the spot. Ethan, watching her from across the room, looked a wreck. He was visibly unsettled by the change in her. The woman he had tried to silence was now radiating an unstoppable force. "Eleanor, darling, you look different," he stammered, pulling her aside into a dark corner. "Different, Ethan? You mean happy? Confident? Like the woman you married before you convinced me to be less than I am?" She challenged, her voice a calm whisper. "You're right, I am different, because I finally realized I deserve better." At 10 p.m., just as Ethan was toasting a trio of crucial international investors, Charlotte materialized and discreetly handed Eleanor the envelope. Eleanor glided back to the group, the gold of her dress blazing under the lights. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she interjected, her smile radiant. "Ethan, my love, I need to talk to you right now." He took the envelope, annoyed, but trying to maintain his professional facade. His face drained of all color as his eyes scanned the legal documents inside. "What is this?" he choked out. "Divorce papers," Eleanor announced, her voice perfectly modulated to carry across the suddenly hushed section of the ballroom. "I'm ending our marriage due to adultery, egregious marital fraud, and technical bigamy." The silence was deafening. The crowd instantly became an audience. "Eleanor, not here! You're destroying everything!" Ethan pleaded, trying to physically block her. "Destroying what, Ethan?" she challenged. "Your meticulously crafted image. You destroyed the actual marriage years ago. I am merely being honest about it." She faced the investors, her eyes steady. "Gentlemen, if you are considering a multi-million-dollar investment with Mr. Thorne, you deserve to know you are dealing with a man who has maintained a secret family across the street for 3 years, using our marital accounts to pay for his mistress and their 2 children. He has a pattern of unethical deception toward the people closest to him." Ethan's desperate pleas faded into the rising tide of gasps, whispers, and the clicking of cell phones. His professional life was collapsing in real time. "For those who don't know me," Eleanor concluded, facing the entire room with a final, magnificent flourish, I am Eleanor Vance. For 3 years, I was the invisible wife. As of tonight, I am simply Eleanor Vance, and I'm excited to discover who I'll be next." She turned, her sister taking her arm, and walked out, leaving the man who had tried to erase her to face the wreckage of his own making. Conclusion: the most beautiful love. 2 years later, Eleanor sat on the sunlit terrace of her chic Greenwich Village apartment, reviewing contracts for her successful corporate consulting firm. She had won a generous settlement, which allowed her to launch her own business focused on organizational development, ironically using her experience of being invisible to help companies foster healthier, more visible employee cultures. Ethan's career had tanked, and Serafina, now a good friend, received a fair settlement for her children. Eleanor was content. Her life was solid, thriving, and free of lies. She was whole. One afternoon, her doorbell rang. Standing there was a man her age, warm eyes behind subtle glasses, carrying a box of homemade blueberry muffins. "Excuse me," he said with a shy, genuine smile. "I'm Julian Harris, your new next-door neighbor, and my grandmother insisted I always introduce myself with baked goods." Eleanor smiled, a real forced smile. "I'm Eleanor. Come in. I just made coffee." Julian was an architect, specializing in sustainable housing. Their conversation flowed with an ease Eleanor hadn't experienced in years. He was attentive, earnest, and present. He was safe, solid, and utterly genuine. A few weeks later, she confessed her past, her destroyed trust, and her walls. "I understand," Julian said softly. "Trust is built slowly. I like who you are, Eleanor, walls and all. If you ever decide you want to explore letting someone in, I'll be here. And if you don't, I'll still be here as your friend." "You're extraordinary. I don't need you to change to be enough for me." In his patience and unconditional acceptance, Eleanor saw something she'd never witnessed in Ethan, a love that demanded nothing. She finally understood that the gold dress was a symbol of her choice to demand more, and the new life she had built on the wreckage of the old was strong enough to support the possibility of true, honest love. She had become the queen of her own destiny, proving that sometimes the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's simply showing the world who you truly are, and realizing that your value was never dependent on anyone else's lies. Keen to find out more? If you loved Eleanor's epic revenge and her journey to finding a pure, honest love, share this story with a friend. Let us know your favorite part in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of triumph. Part 5. The Unconditional Architect. Eleanor took a deep, shaky breath, the gentle scent of blueberry muffins and fresh coffee hanging in the air. Julian's soft-spoken assurance, "I like who you are, Eleanor, walls and all," was more disarming than any aggressive declaration of love could have been. Ethan's attention had always felt like a transaction, a demand for her to be a certain way. Julian's presence was a peaceful offering. "You really mean that, don't you?" Eleanor finally whispered, her eyes searching his face for any hint of the calculated agenda she was so adept at spotting. Julian merely smiled, a genuine, slightly shy upturn of his lips that reached his kind eyes. "Why would I need you to be anything other than the remarkable woman who runs a successful consulting firm and just baked me coffee, Eleanor? My life is complete with my work, my community, and my slightly too prolific muffin production. I'm not here to fill a void in my life with your presence. I'm here because I genuinely enjoy your company." That was the key difference. Ethan had needed her to be less so he could be more. Julian seemed perfectly content with who he was, and simply appreciated her moreness. Eleanor allowed him to stay for another hour, talking easily about his sustainable architecture projects and her consulting philosophy. When he finally stood to leave, he simply placed his coffee cup on the counter, thanked her for the conversation, and made no move to touch her. No awkward pivot toward a date. "I'll see you around, neighbor," he said. "The new coffee shop on Bleecker is incredible, by the way. You should check it out." He was offering suggestions, not ultimatums. Invitations, not demands. Interaction point 1. 3. In a post-betrayal relationship, what do you think is the hardest thing to accept? The lack of drama? The honest communication? Or the genuine patience? Share your thoughts below. The Wall Street lesson. Applied to the heart, Eleanor continued her work, but Julian's quiet presence became a constant, comforting undertone to her life. He was there, reliable, predictable in the best way. He'd leave a carton of fresh eggs from the Union Square market at her door, knowing she was busy. He'd text her a link to an article about organizational culture, just because he remembered they'd talked about it. He never pressed for a date, never asked about her past, and never once made her feel guilty for her emotional distance. "He's running a slow-burn strategy on you, Elle," Charlotte teased during their weekly dinner. "He's brilliant. He's building an infrastructure of trust, brick by brick. He's the opposite of a pump-and-dump scheme. It's just exhausting," Eleanor admitted, twirling the stem of her wine glass. "The lack of drama. I spent 3 years in high-stakes covert warfare. Now, it's just peace, and peace feels like a trap." Charlotte leaned forward. "Think like a consultant, Elle. What was the core problem with Ethan? He was an unreliable asset. He had a high-risk profile and delivered low return on emotional investment. Julian has a low-risk profile and a proven track record of reliability. You're emotionally conditioned to look for the high-risk gamble because that's what you were used to. You need to recalibrate your internal metric for value." Eleanor realized her sister was right. She was subconsciously waiting for the catch, the lie, the dramatic drop that always followed the high. The first date, a test of truth. After 2 months of neighborly friendship, Julian finally asked her out properly. "There's a beautiful new exhibit at the Met focused on 19th century architecture. I'd love to take you. Just us. And if you're not ready, that's perfectly fine. We can just trade more muffins." Eleanor agreed. The date wasn't a dazzling, expensive show like the ones Ethan used to arrange. It was simple, thoughtful, and personal. Julian wore a clean, well-fitting blazer, and he knew enough about the exhibit to hold an intelligent conversation. But he was more interested in her perspective. At one point, he asked her about her consulting business. Eleanor, feeling brave, finally offered a glimpse into her past, omitting names, but detailing the trauma. "I built my business on the realization that I had become invisible," she said, looking down at her hands. "I know how to help people find their voice because I had to fight tooth and nail to find mine." Julian put his hand over hers, a brief, gentle, non-possessive touch. "That's not a weakness, Eleanor. That's a superpower. You turned deep pain into a purpose that helps others. That's the most beautiful kind of strength there is." There was no pity in his eyes, only admiration. Ethan would have seen her pain as a vulnerability he could exploit. Julian saw it as the foundation of her current strength. The confession and the real wall. A few weeks later, they were having dinner at her apartment. The atmosphere was intimate, comfortable. Eleanor finally felt ready to let him see the full picture. "I should tell you the truth about my divorce," she began, detailing the scandal, the bigamy, the public destruction of Ethan's reputation. It was epic. It was a spectacular show of revenge. But after it was over, I realized that the woman who was capable of that kind of strategic destruction is the same woman who is completely terrified of a simple, quiet love. She looked at him, her voice raw. "I don't know how to do this, Julian. I don't know how to trust a good man who isn't trying to change me. I keep waiting for the lie." The other shoe to drop. Julian paused, taking a sip of his wine. He didn't try to solve her problem or dismiss her feelings. "Eleanor," he said, meeting her gaze steadily, "you've built this magnificent fortress to protect yourself, and that's smart. But I'm an architect. I know that even the strongest walls have doors. My job isn't to blast yours down. It's to keep knocking politely, every single day, and to prove, through nothing but my actions and consistency, that when you decide to open that door, I'm the kind of man who will never leave you standing alone in the cold." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a small, folded receipt. "This is from the Bleecker Street coffee shop 26 days ago," he said, handing it to her. "The day I suggested you check it out. I've gone back every single day since, just to grab my coffee, because it reminds me of the first time you smiled genuinely at me. I don't keep it to track you. I keep it because it's a reminder of what you brought into my world. That's who I am. Consistent, reliable, boring maybe, but never a lie. Eleanor took the receipt, a mundane scrap of paper that held more truth than any diamond Ethan had given her. It wasn't a 5-carat rock. It was a 2.50 coffee receipt, and it meant everything. Interaction point 2-3. Do you think a small, consistent act, like Julian's coffee habit, is more meaningful than a grand, expensive gesture? How long do you think Eleanor should wait before she fully trusts him? Tell us your thoughts. The new foundation from that night forward, Eleanor began to dismantle her walls, not with a wrecking ball, but one brick at a time. She introduced Julian to Charlotte, who, after a tense, laser-focused interrogation, gave him her seal of approval. He's a keeper, Elle. He's not afraid of your strength, and he respects your story. 2 years after the divorce, 2 years after reclaiming her life, Eleanor stood on the terrace with Julian, watching the sunset over the glittering skyline. You know, she mused, leaning against him. Ethan used to say he was building an empire. That was his dream. Julian wrapped his arm around her. And what are you building now, Eleanor? She looked up at him, her eyes finally clear of the pain of the past. I'm building a home, Julian. A sustainable, honest, beautiful home. And I think I'd like you to be the chief architect of the rest of it. He didn't need a 5-carat lie or a public declaration. His smile was all the answer she needed. Eleanor had learned that true power wasn't in the spectacular destruction of a traitor, but in the quiet, courageous choice to open your heart to the possibility of a love that was worthy of the queen she had become. The marigold gold dress remained in her closet, not as a monument to vengeance, but as a reminder of the night she chose to shine, paving the way for the most beautiful, most honest love of her life. Final call to action. That's the end of Eleanor's extraordinary journey from betrayal to triumph. What did you learn from her story? Like this video. Comment with your final thoughts on the true meaning of revenge, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of resilience and power. Part 6. The strength of quiet vulnerability. Eleanor and Julian settled into a rhythm that was, for Eleanor, radically new and wonderfully comforting. Their love wasn't built on grand, exhausting drama or secret rendezvous. It was constructed from the honest, mundane, and beautiful moments of everyday life. Sharing the Sunday crossword, debating the merits of different sustainable building materials, or Julian patiently teaching her how to use his architectural software. She quickly realized the silent tension she'd carried during her marriage to Ethan had disappeared. With Ethan, every moment was a performance, a careful attempt to be the perfect wife so she wouldn't trigger one of his business trips. With Julian, she was simply Eleanor. One evening, Julian walked into her apartment holding a single, slightly wilted sunflower. "Sorry," he chuckled. "I grabbed this from the bodega around the corner. It's not a dozen perfect roses, but it made me think of your dress at the gala. That radiant gold." Eleanor accepted the flower, touched by the uncalculated sincerity. "It's perfect, Julian. Thank you." "I know it's a big step for you," Julian said, his voice dropping slightly. "But I've been thinking of buying a house, a brownstone in Brooklyn. I want to renovate it completely, sustainable, smart, a real passion project. And I want you to be my sounding board, my chief consultant on how to make it feel like a home, not just a structure." Eleanor's heart fluttered. Ethan had bought houses as investments, never consulting her, only instructing her on what society expected her to do with them. Julian was asking her to co-create a life. "I'd be honored, Chief Architect," she smiled, feeling a genuine lightness in her chest. Interaction point. Buying a house together is a huge step. If you were advising Eleanor, what's the one red flag from her marriage to Ethan she must make sure Julian passes before committing to this long-term project? The uncomfortable convergence, the true test of Eleanor's healing, came 3 months later, Charlotte called her with a rare note of caution in her voice. "Eleanor, there's a big industry event next week, the Global Consulting Summit. You've been invited to speak on ethical leadership, and Ethan Thorne is scheduled to be on a panel discussing crisis management." A cold knot formed in Eleanor's stomach. She hadn't seen Ethan since the gala, and the thought of facing him again, especially in a professional setting where she was the victor and he was the cautionary tale, was daunting. "I won't go," Eleanor decided immediately. "It's not worth the drama. I've moved past him." "Wrong," Charlotte countered sharply. "You going is the final nail in the coffin of his relevance and the ultimate statement of your triumph. You're speaking on ethical leadership, Elle. He's talking about how to clean up a mess. That positioning alone is everything. And I want you to bring Julian." Eleanor hesitated, then looked over at Julian, who was quietly sketching on his iPad at her kitchen counter. She walked over and told him the situation, laying out the possibility of a confrontation. Julian put down his pencil. He didn't look threatened or excited by the drama. He simply looked at her. "Eleanor, I understand if you don't want to go," he said, taking her hands. "But let me be clear. I'm not afraid of your past, and I certainly won't let a man who tried to dim your light stop you from shining on the global stage. If you decide to go, I will be there, not as your shield, but as the man who is incredibly proud to watch you speak." His calm resolve was the exact antidote to Ethan's volatility. Eleanor accepted. She wasn't going to let the ghost of her marriage dictate her future. The final word. The summit was held at a major convention center in Midtown. Eleanor was stunning in a bespoke navy suit. Professional, commanding, and radiating authority. Julian, understated but elegant, stayed by her side before her speech, offering quiet support. When Eleanor stepped onto the stage, the crowd was captivated. Her speech was powerful, eloquent, weaving her personal journey of finding her voice into a profound argument for transparency and integrity in business. She received a standing ovation. Later, Eleanor and Julian were mingling near the press section when Ethan, looking noticeably older, thinner, and carrying the permanent stress of his tarnished reputation, approached them. "Eleanor," Ethan said, his voice low and practiced, a desperate attempt at charm. "You were impressive. Truly." He ignored Julian completely, a final pathetic attempt to assert ownership over Eleanor. "I heard you're doing well. Look, I've been thinking. Now that the dust has settled, we had something real, Eleanor. Maybe we could—" Before he could finish, Julian, who had been listening patiently, stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice or make a scene. His presence alone was enough. "Mr. Thorne," Julian interrupted politely but firmly, "Eleanor is doing exceptionally well, and I can assure you that the future she is building has no room for the kind of unethical infrastructure you specialized in. Her value is not up for negotiation or revisiting." He gently placed his hand on Eleanor's lower back, a gesture of ownership that was protective, not possessive. Ethan, finally acknowledging Julian, flinched. The look on his face was one of complete, utter defeat. Not because of the public scandal, but because he saw the depth of the genuine, quiet connection between Eleanor and Julian. A connection built on honesty, something Ethan could never replicate. He mumbled an apology and walked away, his shoulders slumped in resignation. Eleanor turned to Julian, her eyes shining with gratitude and a powerful final sense of closure. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Julian replied, his voice still gentle. "Because your past is part of your story, but it has no claim on your present. And because, frankly, he was still disrespecting your time." Interaction point 2-3. Julian's final line is a powerful, understated defense. "Do you think subtle, honest support, Julian, is more effective against a narcissist than explosive confrontation, Gala? Why or why not?" The sustainable foundation months later, Eleanor stood in the Brooklyn brownstone, that Julian had purchased. It was still a maze of exposed beams and blueprints, but she saw the vision. Julian had asked her to pick out the cornerstone, the very first piece of the foundation to be laid. Eleanor had chosen a simple inscribed stone that she'd kept hidden away. The $2.50 coffee receipt. "This is the cornerstone," she told Julian, tears welling up in her eyes. This receipt, this small act of honesty, built more trust than the 5-carat lie ever could. This is the foundation. Julian smiled, recognizing the full weight of the gesture. Then let's build the most honest, sustainable, beautiful life on it. Chief consultant. A year after that, on their terrace overlooking the completed sun-drenched brownstone, a true home built from light, honesty, and sustainable materials. Julian didn't give her a diamond ring. Instead, he presented her with a simple tetsto silver band engraved on the inside with $2.50. "No more carats, just commitment," he whispered, sliding the ring onto her finger. A constant reminder that the greatest value is in the simplest truth. Eleanor, truly radiant, truly free, accepted. The woman who had fought so hard to reclaim her power had finally found a man who simply cherished it. She had learned that the most beautiful love story is the one that is truly, deeply, and unconditionally unscripted. The most meaningful proposal ever. Share this empowering story with anyone who needs a reminder that the storm always clears. Comment below with your favorite detail from Eleanor and Julian's new life, and keep subscribing for more epic tales of love and triumph. Tuyet voi. Tôi rất vui vì bạn muốn tiếp tục theo dõi cuộc sống mới của Eleanor và Julian. Chúng ta sẽ cùng nhau viết thêm một phần nữa, tập trung vào những thử thách ngọt ngào của một cuộc sống không có drama và cách họ bắt đầu xây dựng di sản của mình. Đây là phần GI, tập trung vào việc áp dụng những bài học cũ vào một tương lai mới với những yêu cầu của bạn được áp dụng xuyên suốt. The 5-Carat Lie, Part 7, The Legacy of Truth, Call to Action. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Eleanor and Julian are proving that true partnership is the ultimate power move. Hit the bell icon to follow their inspiring journey. Part 7. Architecting a Shared Future. Eleanor and Julian were now a power couple in their own right, though their power was quiet, intentional, and rooted in shared values. Julian's firm, sustainable foundations was revolutionizing housing development across Brooklyn, and Eleanor's consulting practice, Vance Organizational Strategies, was in high demand, thanks in part to her compelling ethical stance. Their biggest joint project, the brownstone renovation, moved from a passion project to a testament of their relationship. Every decision, from choosing reclaimed wood floors to installing solar panels, was made through honest, sometimes intense, debate. It was a stark contrast to her marriage with Ethan, where silence was mistaken for agreement and decisions were unilateral. One afternoon, while reviewing samples of Italian marble for the kitchen, Eleanor paused. "Julian, this marble is gorgeous, but it's outrageously expensive. Remember, the goal is sustainable and honest. We should stick to the locally sourced quartz." Julian looked at her, then back at the sleek, imported marble. "You're right. It's the Ethan in me. I suppose. That old impulse to equate value with cost." Eleanor smiled, a flash of her old self mixed with her new wisdom. "We're building something that lasts, Julian, not something that looks expensive. The greatest luxury we have is authenticity." He walked around the heavy marble slab and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for the reality check, Chief Consultant. You're the best organizational strategy my heart has ever known." Interaction point. 3. Julian and Eleanor are building their life on sustainable principles. What do you think is the single most important sustainable principle for a successful relationship? Transparency, consistency, shared vision. Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. The quiet confrontation with the past, despite their deliberate efforts to move forward, the past occasionally cast a faint shadow. One evening, an old acquaintance from Ethan's circle, a socialite named Beverly Hayes, tracked Eleanor down at a gallery opening. Beverly, dressed in head-to-toe designer clothes, approached Eleanor with a saccharine smile. "Eleanor, darling, you are blooming. I hear you've taken up with that sweet architect, the one with the lovely small firm." Eleanor, cool and composed, met her gaze. "Julian is extraordinary, Beverly, and his firm is dedicated to building affordable, high-quality homes. We're proud of the work we do." Beverly leaned in conspiratorially. "Of course, so altruistic. But honestly, Eleanor, I have to ask, don't you miss the real money? The power? Ethan might be a disaster now, but at least he played in the big leagues. Your life seems cozy. Aren't you afraid of getting too comfortable?" The accusation of being cozy and comfortable was meant to sting, to remind Eleanor of the dazzling, high-stakes life she had lost. Eleanor didn't rise to the bait. She simply took Julian's arm and smiled with genuine pity for Beverly. "Beverly, you mistake calmness for complacency," Eleanor stated clearly. "I used to have money and power built on lies and anxiety. Today, I have peace and purpose built on truth. The only thing I fear is being a ghost in my own life again. And I promise you, this honest, peaceful, real life is the biggest league I've ever played in." She turned and walked away with Julian, leaving Beverly to stare after them, unable to comprehend the wealth of self-possession Eleanor now commanded. Julian squeezed her hand. "The biggest league indeed. No 5-carat rock required." Call to action. Eleanor's response to Beverly is epic. If you've ever been underestimated, like this video and let us know how you responded. Comment if you agree that peace and purpose are the ultimate luxury, the legacy of Charlotte and Serafina. Eleanor's journey also had a lasting impact on the other women in her life. Charlotte Vance, inspired by the ethical clarity of Eleanor's case, shifted her high-powered corporate practice to focus entirely on women's economic justice in divorce and business law, becoming a champion for those who were being financially manipulated. And Serafina Reyes, having found stability and a fair settlement, continued her architectural career, focusing on designs for affordable family housing. She and Eleanor maintained a quiet, respectful friendship, a bond forged in shared betrayal. "It's strange," Serafina admitted to Eleanor one day over coffee. "Ethan convinced me that if a man was rich enough, his chaos was just passion. You showed me that a man's true worth is in his predictability and his integrity." Eleanor realized that the biggest success of her revenge was not Ethan's downfall, but the redemption and empowerment of the women he had tried to control. She hadn't just saved herself. She had inadvertently changed the course of 2 other lives. The inscribed promise. A year and a half after their quiet, intimate engagement, Eleanor and Julian decided to solidify their sustainable foundation by getting married in the backyard of their newly finished brownstone. There were no society reporters, no enormous guest lists, and no grand performative gestures. Just Charlotte, Serafina, the children, now thriving and secure, and a few close friends. For the exchange of vows, Julian didn't pull out a speech. He simply presented Eleanor with a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was the original 2.50 coffee receipt, laminated, perfectly preserved, and set into a simple, beautiful wooden frame. "This is my vow," Julian whispered, his voice thick with emotion. to always prioritize the small, consistent truth over the grand, glamorous lie. To always see your value, even in the smallest moments. To be your sustainable foundation. Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, took the framed receipt. She had worn the gold dress once to reclaim her dignity. She wore a simple white dress today to seal her happiness. "And this is mine," she replied, placing her hand over his. To never stop being the strong woman you love, and to always recognize that the greatest wealth we can ever build is a legacy of truth. As they kissed, surrounded by the sustainable beauty of the home they built together, Eleanor knew she had finally escaped the golden cage. She wasn't just Eleanor Vance, the woman who had the epic revenge. She was Eleanor Harris, a woman defined by her choices, her purpose, and the unconditional love of a man who loved her, walls and all. The ultimate happy ending. Share this full, inspiring story with anyone who needs to believe in love after loss. Comment with your favorite quote from Eleanor's journey, and thank you for subscribing and making this story of resilience a triumph. Part 8. The Ripple Effect of Authenticity. 5 years after that fateful gala night, Eleanor and Julian have not only built a sustainable home for themselves, but have also become innovators, spreading a philosophy of transparent and sustainable living into their community. Their brownstone renovation project in Brooklyn has become a model, not only for green design, but also for how a couple can collaborate professionally without control or deception. Julian's Sustainable Foundations has begun to receive larger contracts, but Julian always puts quality and ethics above profit. "You know what I love most about my job, Eleanor?" Julian asks her one morning, over coffee on a rooftop overlooking the city. "It's predictability. The building materials, the structure, the partnership, it's all based on truth and precision, just like ours." Eleanor nods, remembering the days of uncertainty and volatility that Ethan experienced. She was used to anticipating the next lie. Now, she just has to anticipate delicious breakfasts and unwavering support from her husband. Strong relationships are a competitive advantage. Which aspect of her organizational consulting work do you think Eleanor's experience rebuilding trust has helped her succeed most? Risk assessment, building a culture of transparency, or crisis management? Comment. The Unplanned Mentor. Eleanor, as a consultant, frequently uses her own story, without naming names, as a case study of the demise of an organization based on dishonesty. This attracted a special clientele, successful women trapped in disrespectful or deceitful marriages. One of them was Genevieve Keller, the wife of a major Silicon Valley tech CEO. Genevieve came to Eleanor not to save her marriage, but to find a way out without destroying the career and reputation she had built. In a private session, Genevieve looked directly at Eleanor. "You know everything I need to know about your past, Eleanor. I know you went public with your divorce. I know you used that dramatic moment to regain power. But what I want to ask is, how dare you?" Eleanor smiled, a smile that was both strong and calm. "Genevieve, the truth is that lies are much more expensive than the truth. I spent 3 years and all my mental energy maintaining the lie that I was happy and that my marriage was perfect. The moment I decided to come out, I lost my material comfort, but I regained my focus and energy. I no longer had to act." She pointed to the simple silver wedding band engraved with 250 on her hand. "He taught me that consistency is the ultimate power. Julian doesn't promise big things. He just delivers on the small things, honestly. That's the foundation you need." Eleanor's courage inspired Genevieve to take action. A few months later, Genevieve sent Eleanor a terse email. I applied. No drama, no drama. I chose the small trust fund over the 5-carat rock. Thank you, my unwanted mentor. Eleanor turned her personal experience into a career. If you were faced with a difficult truth, would you choose the peaceful truth or the glamorous lie? Let us know your decision in the comments. The unexpected visitor, a life without drama, doesn't mean there are no surprises. One afternoon, their doorbell rang. Julian opened the door to find a middle-aged woman standing there, dressed simply, but with a worried look in her eyes. It was Ethan Thorne's mother. Julian politely invited her in, and she sat down on the sofa in their living room, looking around the cozy, light-filled house. You're Julian, right? He told me about you, she said softly. I apologize for disturbing you. I came here for Eleanor. Eleanor appeared, a little surprised, but still calm. Hello, Auntie. Long time no see, Eleanor said. Mrs. Thorne looked at Eleanor, and there was no longer the old judgment or contempt in her eyes, but regret. I came to apologize, Eleanor, she said, her voice trembling. I always knew Ethan was a liar, but I always chose to support my son. For fame, for fortune. I encouraged you to be the shadow Ethan needed. I thought money was everything. But looking at the way you live now, looking at this house, looking at the way Julian treats you, I realize I was wrong. Mrs. Thorne looked at Julian. Julian, you gave her something our family could never give. The truth. Ethan is now alone. He has lost everything that truly matters. Eleanor and Julian looked at each other. This was not victory. This was an admission of truth, given in private. Eleanor gently placed her hand on Mrs. Auntie, I had to learn that loneliness and lies are not the price to pay for success. I hope Ethan finds his own path, but I am no longer the one who can help him. After Mrs. Thorne left, Julian hugged Eleanor from behind, inhaling the scent of her hair. See, my love, Julian whispered. You don't need to make public displays of power. Your truth is powerful enough to change even those who oppose you. Eleanor knew he was right. She no longer needed apologies or recognition from the outside world. She had validation from within, and from the man who had helped her build a life that no lie could touch. Part 9. Building the Empire of Integrity. The stability and quiet success of Eleanor and Julian's life created a compelling narrative. They weren't just building beautiful homes and consulting practices. They were building an empire of integrity, a stark, refreshing contrast to the high-stakes, ethically compromised world they had both observed. Their joint projects began to receive significant media attention, not for the lavish expense of the materials, but for the authenticity of their partnership and their commitment to sustainable, honest practices. One feature article in Forbes titled, From Marital Fraud to Ethical Fortune, the Vance-Harris Strategy, highlighted their unique approach. Eleanor's firm consulted on the internal culture of Julian's architectural practice, ensuring transparency in every client deal and employee interaction. Julian's firm, in turn, built the physical spaces for Eleanor's expanding consulting offices, ensuring every beam and glass wall reflected her organizational clarity philosophy. We learned that the most fragile structures are those built on lies, Eleanor explained in a joint interview. The 5-carat lie, whether it's in a marriage or a business deal, always has a devastating structural weakness. Our strategy now is to maximize emotional ROI, return on investment, through radical honesty. Interaction Point 1. Eleanor's concept of emotional ROI is revolutionary. In business, which do you believe is the riskiest investment? An unproven, high-hype product or an untrustworthy business partner? Share your corporate wisdom in the comments below. The full circle of Serafina. Serafina Reyes, having flourished in her own career, came back into their orbit for an unexpected collaboration. Serafina's new firm, specializing in sustainable, low-cost housing for young families, was struggling to secure land development rights in a complex area of Queens. Julian, impressed by Serafina's dedication to honest design, offered his technical expertise and, more importantly, leveraged his ethical reputation to broker the deal. Eleanor, seeing the full circle of their strange, shared history, didn't hesitate to help. She personally consulted Serafina on the pitch, helping her to frame the project as an integrity investment, a long-term commitment to community, not a short-term cash grab. "We were both victims of Ethan's need for control," Eleanor told Serafina during one planning session. "He used us to build his ego. Now we use our skills to build something meaningful, something that helps other women and families avoid the kind of instability we experienced." The collaboration was a resounding success. The development project secured funding, and the Serafina Reyes-Julian Harris partnership was celebrated in the city planning community, a symbolic victory over the destructive chaos of the Ethan Thorne era. The next milestone, their dedication to building a life over a facade, led to Julian purchasing a beautiful, antique, slightly tarnished brass plaque. He had it engraved with a single, profound date, 2025-10-12, the exact date Eleanor had written down her initial personal instruction. Dung Rut Ngan Ko Chuin, Hei Viet Chuan, Nhu Ko Chuin Guk, Huak Dai Hon. He presented it to her on their anniversary. "This is the date of your rebirth, Eleanor," Julian explained, holding the plaque. "The day you gave the command to not shorten your story, but to live it fully. It was the first honest commitment you made to yourself after the lie. And that commitment is why we are here." Eleanor, deeply moved, realized that Julian didn't just love her. He respected the process of her recovery. He understood that her fierce need for a complete story was the driving force behind her success. "It will hang in the entrance of our new office," Eleanor decided, tears in her eyes. A permanent reminder that the longest, most detailed story is always the one worth living. Interaction point 2-3. Julian's gift highlights the importance of keeping your story long and full. What small, private moment in your past do you believe was the true turning point in your life? Acknowledge that moment in the comments below. The unscripted arrival life, having finally achieved a beautiful rhythm, decided to surprise them with a whole new, unscripted chapter. Eleanor was due to deliver a keynote speech at a major national conference in Chicago, and Julian insisted on accompanying her. As they were packing, Eleanor felt a wave of nausea, unlike any travel sickness she'd experienced before. A quiet visit to the doctor later, and the 250 commitment was about to receive a massive, beautiful addition. Eleanor, at 30, was pregnant. Julian's reaction wasn't a rushed calculation or a panicked attempt to incorporate the news into a business plan. It was simple, profound joy. He gently took her hand, looked down at her wedding band, and then at her eyes. "We've built an honest structure, Eleanor," he whispered, a huge smile spreading across his face. "Now, we get to fill it with an honest, unburdened life. I couldn't imagine a more perfect next chapter." Eleanor, leaning against the man who saw her past, celebrated her present, and championed her future, knew that her story of epic revenge had finally transitioned into a legend of enduring love. The 5-carat lie was gone, replaced by a life rich with the priceless, irreplaceable value of the truth. A new life, the ultimate symbol of a secure future. Share this full, heartwarming story with friends. Comment with your best wishes for Eleanor and Julian's family, and subscribe for more inspiration. Part 10. The unburdened life. Eleanor and Julian's quiet joy over the pregnancy filled their brownstone with an electric, anticipatory energy. For Eleanor, the experience was profoundly different from what she might have imagined during her marriage to Ethan. There was no pressure to have a perfect photogenic pregnancy, no demand to announce the news strategically for business gains. It was simply a shared miracle. Julian, the meticulous architect, approached fatherhood with the same measured, consistent patience he applied to his designs. He read every book, attended every class, and, crucially, ensured Eleanor felt supported, never scrutinized. He built a custom nursery in the sunniest corner of the brownstone, using only natural, non-toxic materials, dedicating his time not to expensive, designer baby gear, but to crafting a space that was honest and secure. "This room has no lies, Eleanor," Julian declared, finishing the last coat of matte, sustainable paint. "Only the promise of a safe, transparent start." Eleanor, watching him, realized that their child would never know the anxiety of a father who was emotionally absent, or a mother who lived in fear of disclosure. This was the ultimate victory, breaking the cycle of deception. Interaction point 13. What is the most important foundation for raising a child after experiencing great betrayal? Is it financial security, emotional transparency, or consistent presence? Share your parenting philosophy in the comments. The final farewell to the past. 3 weeks before her due date, while sorting through old storage boxes, Eleanor came across a memory box from her first marriage. She found the $5 carat diamond ring. It lay there, glittering menacingly, a heavy, beautiful, undeniable lie. She had kept it not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder of the price of a shallow promise. Now, it felt like a cold, irrelevant relic. Julian found her sitting on the floor, holding the massive ring. He sat down quietly beside her, not asking, just being. "It's funny," Eleanor said, turning the diamond over in her palm. "Ethan thought this rock was his greatest asset, his badge of honor, but it was just a weight that prevented me from floating." Julian gently took the ring from her, feeling its cold heft. "It's an object, Eleanor. It holds no power unless you give it power." "I know," she sighed. "But what do I do with it? I can't sell it. It feels tainted. I can't keep it." Julian, the architect of solutions, smiled. "We are in the business of sustainable repurposing, my love. We don't destroy assets. We transform them." They decided to donate the diamond to a local charity that supported women escaping financially abusive marriages. The organization planned to use the diamond as the centerpiece for a major fundraising auction. The final lot description, approved by Eleanor, read, "The $5 carat lie, a symbol of a high price paid for deception, now repurposed to fund freedom and truth." This final act of transformation, turning the physical manifestation of Ethan's deceit into a literal engine for other women's liberation, was Eleanor's true, quiet closing chapter on her revenge. The unscripted arrival. Their daughter, Clara, arrived quietly, honestly, and without any complications in the spring. Her arrival was celebrated not with a lavish party, but with a simple gathering of those who genuinely cared: Charlotte, Serafina, and a handful of close friends. Holding Clara in the honest, sunlight-filled nursery, Eleanor felt a peace deeper than she had ever known. She was strong, capable, and loved unconditionally. The woman who had been afraid of vulnerability was now embracing the ultimate act of openness: motherhood. "She is completely unburdened," Eleanor whispered to Julian, watching Clara sleep. no secrets to keep, no image to uphold. Julian kissed her temple. She has the strongest foundation possible, Eleanor. A life built on truth and love. The enduring legacy Eleanor and Julian continued to live their unscripted life, their success becoming a testament to their core philosophy. They learned that the joy in their marriage wasn't the absence of conflict, but the courage to navigate conflict with absolute honesty. Their story, the woman who refused to shorten her pain, the man who respected her full story, and the $2.50 coffee receipt that became their cornerstone, became an enduring legend among their peers. Eleanor Vance had transformed from the invisible wife to the Wall Street queen, not through wealth or public spectacle, but through the unflinching power of her own truth. She had not just sought a second chance at happiness. She had architected a legacy of integrity for the rest of her life and for the life of the unburdened child sleeping peacefully in her arms. The $5 carrot lie had been a painful chapter, but the priceless truth of her new life was the story that would define her forever. This is the complete story of Eleanor Vance. Share this epic journey of healing and triumph with anyone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. Comment with the single most important lesson you learned, and thank you for subscribing and supporting the power of a complete, honest story.